For news that's short, sharp and
Are
shrewd.
you talking about the podcast or me?
Both.
Backhanded compliment.
This is Up Late with Ben Harvey. The floods are unbelievable.
A lot of things are unbelievable at the moment. If I'd said to you 3 years ago, when half of New South Wales was on fire, that in 2022 half of New South Wales would be underwater, you never would have believed me.
No, we are living in strange times.
Imagine we were doing this in 2019, before anyone had heard of a place called Wuhan. And in that conversation, I predicted that within 3 years, 6 million people would be dead because of a health pandemic. During that pandemic, the most sought-after commodity wasn't water or food or medicine, it was 3-ply sorbent.
I need TV for my bunghole.
That 8-year-olds would be wearing masks to school. Russia had invaded Europe. The Australian Army isn't looking at that because it's busy responding to biblical floods on the East Coast. The shelves at Coles and Woolies look like a Polish supermarket in 1946. Fuel's at $2.20 a litre. And Mark McGowan's private text messages were being read in open court because he was being sued by Clive Palmer. You probably wouldn't have believed me.
Yeah, well, those text messages are pretty bizarre.
The problem with defamation action, and unfortunately I know a bit about this, there's something called discovery. You have to hand over to the other person's lawyers any information in your possession that might be relevant to the case. Handwritten notes, tape recordings, sketches, text messages, WhatsApp exchanges, photos, faxes, emails, the lot. It's all out there in open court for all the world to see.
Sheesh.
It's like a giant x-ray machine over your life, and it's very unsettling because human beings often say some childish, stupid shit when they think they're in a private conversation.
Pull my finger.
Right now, Premier Mark McGowan and WA Attorney General John Quigley are the Beavis and Butthead of Australia's judicial system.
Let's go break something.
Yeah.
The Sydney court, hearing the Palmer v McGowan defamation trial, has just been shown what was on the Premier's phone.
So awkward.
Well, considering Quigley was on the other end of the conversation, and the guy's pretty loose, so we're lucky we didn't have an accidental dick pic tendered as evidence, considering that, it wasn't too bad. As is often the case, private messages are not so much legally compromising as just plain old embarrassing. Palmer's lawyer, Peter Gray, started the day by asking the Premier why he drafted legislation that would prevent Clive from suing the government of WA for $30 billion. That law was introduced because Palmer thought the state had illegally blocked him from developing an iron ore deposit in the Pilbara. The $30 billion was years of lost earnings and pain and suffering and whatnot. McGowan says the idea of giving Palmer billions of dollars made him feel sick.
And I just threw up in my mouth a little bit.
In fact, more than sick. Gray attacked the speed at which the legislation went through Parliament. He suggested the government was panicking and it was, quote, rammed through in a ludicrously short time.
We're going to have to go right to ludicrous speed.
The Palmer legal team appears to be trying to make the case that McGowan genuinely hates Clive, that it wasn't just business or politics.
This time it's personal.
Gray mentioned a 2020 press conference where McGowan described Mr Palmer as Australia's greatest egomaniac and an Olympic-scale narcissist, and then read a text message exchange between McGowan and Quigley that will surely have every politician in the state pouring bleach over their iPhones. He is a fat liar, McGowan wrote. He's the worst Australian who's not in jail. Quigley then refers to Palmer as a big fat liar, which he cleverly shortens to BFL. Get between the BFL and a stack of money and anything goes, Quigley says. Just tell the BFL that Q is not going to fold to intimidation.
So Quigley's referring to himself in the third person.
Yeah. McGowan reckons the BFL gag is quote-unquote brilliant. McGowan told the court, that reflects the way that I thought it was a funny play on the Roald Dahl character, the Big Friendly Giant, the BFG. The Premier brushed it off as a piece of humour with a colleague.
This was locker room talk.
It comes out a bit later that Quigley messaged McGowan to say, I've been awake since 4:15am thinking of ways to beat big fat Clive, the turd. Quigley goes on to describe ways to create a legislative Trojan horse and poison pill, which he hopes could drop the big fat man on his big fat ass.
Fatty fat, 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 fatty
Now, how's this for mortifying? Quigley, who's just split up with his missus at this stage, texts McGowan to say, "Hey, are you glad me single again? Not making love in sweet hours before dawn, instead worrying how to defeat Clive."
Employee of the month right there. Palmer's lawyers don't seem to like the West Australian.
Can't imagine why.
Love is in the air. Love is in the air.
Peter Gray talked about the front pages of the West in the context of a text exchange between McGowan and Kerry Stokes. Kerry Stokes being chairman of 7 West Media, which owns the West Australian newspaper, and up late with Ben Harvey. McGowan messaged Stokes about the Palmer Act, and a few days later, Stokes replied to say, "Well done," to which McGowan replied, "Thanks, Kerry. I was asked about those marvellous front pages today."
That's why they call him Sneakers.
McGowan then says, "I appreciate the support enormously. All the mealy-mouthed chut-chutting about Palmer's rights makes me sick."
I tell you what, the Premier spends a lot of time feeling sick.
Like 3,594 other West Australians. That's how many new COVID infections were reported today, Wednesday.
Bringing the total number of active cases to 15,750.
We're approaching the peak of the Omicron wave, and we have exactly 0 people in ICU because of coronavirus. There are thousands of people in the West Australian hospital system right now. A grand total of 67 of them are there because of COVID. I reckon there will be more people admitted because of ingrown toenails than the deadliest disease since Spanish flu. Health Minister Amber Jade Sanderson has now moved us to a high caseload setting because we've finally got to the point where the virus is everywhere.
That's it, man. Game over, man. It's game over.
Teachers are now deemed critical workers, which means even if they are positive, they can go to work if they're not symptomatic. That's good news because we've got 1,400 school staff in isolation and classrooms are starting to look like a scene from Lord of the Flies. Kids who previously had to stay home because they were considered a close contact will often now be able to continue at school,
provided they have tested negative to COVID-19. This will apply to all students who have been identified as a close contact, except those who have a household member who has tested positive to COVID-19.
Now that's good news because it sucks to have kids in the house while you're trying to work from home.
Not just the kids who are being childish at the moment.
No, they're not. I'm Ben Harvey. If you'd like to watch Up Late with me, Ben Harvey, search for The West Australian on YouTube.